Hey everybody, Sherry Ferguson here with the Portland Chamber of Commerce at the Portland Connections. We are going to wait for a few people to get on. While they are getting on, because some people will go back and watch this. I'm going to start telling a little bit about we will be giving away 2 meals from Milo's Cafe if they comment in the comment section during the live broadcast. So if you missed today, you can always log on. We're on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So log on and you can comment. And each time that you log on, so once a day, you'll be able to go in for a chance to win meals. And this week it's for Milo's Cafe. So always good to log on, just watch a little bit so you can hopefully win some meals. Well, today we are glad to have with us Sammie Arnold with the state of Tennessee. He is chief of staff for our process of opening back up, and the state has given him a task to do that. Can only imagine the hours that you are spending on that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Sammie, how are you doing?
Doing well, Sherry. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I know that Mayor Callis actually connected us, and I'm so glad that he did. We are going to partner, and you're going to be sending me some the Tennessee Pledge posters and things. We're going to get those out to the businesses about how they're supposed to do that. So let's talk about the process of when you were kind of appointed to this role and kind of where we've gone down to that and what steps we've taken to get the state opened back up.
Sure. So, well, it's been, first of all, my permanent job is at the Department of Economic and Community Development. And I am the assistant commissioner there that oversees rural development. And so places like Portland, in my hometown of Dyersburg over in West Tennessee were the communities that we were supporting in my old role. And about 5 weeks ago, I took a temporary leave from ECD, and it feels like it's about 5 months ago, to be honest with you. But honestly, I was just looking back the other day. It was only about 5 weeks ago that I left, and came over here to the Governor's Economic Recovery Group. We call it the ERG, which is the acronym. And my boss over here is the state's tourism commissioner, whose name is Mark Ezel, and he is also taken leave from the tourism department. And it makes sense for him, especially because there's not a lot of tourism that's been going on the past 5 weeks. So he had some time that he was able to dedicate to helping the governor produce a plan to help Tennessee businesses reopen. And so going back to March 4th was the day when Tennessee had the first COVID case. And since then, I think we're up to close to 1,900 or 19,000, COVID cases. Also, since that day, there have been about 450,000 unemployment claims in Tennessee. So 450,000 people have either been laid off from their jobs or seen their hours drastically reduced. And Tennessee's GDP is expected to lose billions of dollars in 2020. And that's one of those, GDP, it sounds like an empty economic stat, but that equates to a lot of Tennesseans who are going to lose their businesses, who had to close their doors because of this pandemic and who are never going to reopen their doors. And so we all take that incredibly seriously. And the governor, of course, was it got to a point because of the success that the governor and our unified command team had with ramping up our testing. One of the statistics I like to often point out is there are only 3 states in the country that are in the top 10 in testing per capita and the bottom 10 in deaths per capita. And Tennessee is one of those states. And so it's because of that success that has allowed us to be one of the more aggressive states in the country about reopening up our economy. And so anyway, over the course of the past 5 weeks, the plan that we put together is called the Tennessee Pledge. Hopefully a lot of the viewers are already familiar with it, but you can see it at tnpledge.com. And Sherry, as you mentioned, we've got some posters and stuff like that we're going to be distributing out to through the local chambers across the state. And if you're a business owner and you're listening to this, and you are familiar with the Tennessee Pledge and your business is following that, reach out to Sherry, and she's got a poster that you can come pick up, and you can hang it in your storefront or in your window. And by doing that, you can get, you give confidence to customers that are walking by that they can come in, and if you have a restaurant that they can come eat safely and be healthy, or if you have a shop that they can come in and shop safely. And because we know that's important to people. It's not just allowing a business to reopen, but we have to get to a point where customers and consumers are confident again to go out and start spending their money. And so that's been the task.
Well, and we've noticed as we opened with the restaurants that it started at 50%. And in that 50%, some of the businesses still didn't open. And part of that being they can't be profitable. Some of these restaurants, it takes 100% of their capacity to be able to make a profit. So whether it's that or whether they just were worried about people not coming out. And that has happened too. Everybody is not, as you're talking about, comfortable coming out. So I think these guidelines are going to help people to be able to find a little bit of confidence as it goes along, knowing that somebody has worked, which you being one of the somebodies, to put together information that helps us to realize how we can do this as safe as possible. Now, we all know that this is not going to solve all the world's problems, and we're never going to have another COVID case, but it's really about keeping those cases low. So last week, the big announcement was that you're working on a plan to get the amusement parks open back up. So, gosh, that just seems like such a big question as to how can you take somebody like Dollywood or something like that. So can you talk a little bit about how the things that you're talking about, you're putting into place, and when these guidelines will come out, and if you know when they'll be opening up?
Sure. And our most recent wave of news and announcements was last Friday. And that announcement was that restaurants and retail shops can move into phase 2, which essentially is no capacity limitations anymore, but they still have to abide by the spacing requirements and other things. And that larger attractions, music venues, and amusement parks and water parks will be able to open starting this upcoming Friday for phase 1. They will be under a 50% capacity restrictions, just like the restaurants were in their phase 1. And the way generally, Sherry, the way we've gone about this is we have worked, first of all, on our ERG team, we have two doctors. One is a deputy commissioner at the Department of Health, and then the second one is an epidemiologist from Vanderbilt. And so they've been in every single meeting, and they have combed and just with us, they've gotten deep into the minutia of every single one of these guidelines, which has been excruciatingly just tedious at times, but obviously well worth it. And so that's that. First of all, I want to stress that we do have that those health professionals that have been advising us throughout this process, and then secondly, we proactively sought out input from the industry groups. So we had various working groups. We have a restaurant working group that we talk to that kind of advises us and makes recommendations for restaurants. And we had an attractions working group. And you mentioned Dollywood. Dollywood was a part of it. Several other larger attractions have been a part of it. And we kind of let them or encourage them, you guys get out there and take the lead on developing some recommended guidelines for your own industry, because you know your industry far better than we ever could. And then they do that. They submit those to us, and that's when we sort of go over them with input from the health professionals. And there's several cases where what the industry recommends, we have to tighten it up a little bit just on the advice of the health professional. But that's been our process, and it seems to be working pretty well so far.
Well, I know that just because you're allowing those to open, I don't know that they'll be ready to open. And that's always good to say too, because again, it's a process. They can't just pop up and all of a sudden have changed all of these,
Nope.
the way that they handle everything. And they have to hire a lot of these people back because they've
That's right.
furloughed a lot of their employees. So they've got to get those back on the books. So it still may be a little bit of time to get them truly up and running. So for cities like me, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question or not, but we have concert series on our main street. So we shut down Main Street, set up a stage on one end. People just come in and kind of hang out and set up in the street for just some community time with music. Are those going to be coming back? And can we do that safely? And are you putting together guidelines for things like people like us? And when can we expect to do something like that?
Yeah. And so the guidelines that we've been working on for larger attractions does include things like fairs and festivals and things like that. And that would include your concert series will be covered under this. And the guidelines that I'm referring to, we were hoping to have them out yesterday or today. Gotten hung up on a couple of small details, but those should be out probably tomorrow.
Okay.
So when those come out, take a look at those, and like I've referred to, you'll be able to do things like have your concert series, but there'll need to be some precautions that everybody takes. Obviously, we need to implement some spacing requirements and different sanitation procedures and stuff like that. But those are the types of things that will be addressed by these guidelines that we'll be putting out.
And as somebody that helps organize that, the city and I, work hard, and they're great community builders, and we love having them. But it's a scary thought to be over something that you're now opening up, and you want to make sure that you do it the right way. So I know how these businesses feel in trying to get back to doing what they do, and doing it safely.
Right.
So as far as the restaurants will be opening up at 100% is kind of where we're going with that.
They will be allowed to, yeah. And as you sort of have touched on a couple of really good points. Just because, like we've mentioned, Dollywood, they'll be able to open on Friday, but I don't think they're planning on it because the new precautions and things and safeguarding procedures that they've got to implement are just going to take them a little more time. And Dollywood employs a lot of people who have been laid off, and you can't just call those people and tell them to come in tomorrow. It just takes a little bit of time to get back and get ramped up. And then another thing you mentioned, Sherry, I wanted to touch on too is it's important to note that our TN pledge guidelines are exactly that. They're guidelines. Some states have gone, with their reopening procedures, have implemented new mandates on businesses. They produce guidelines, but they're not guidelines. They're actually required. They're mandates. And we had a discussion about that. And the governor, where the governor came down on this was that that we weren't going to implement new mandates on businesses. That these were going to be guidelines, and that he sort of had some faith that businesses are going to want to do things the right way. Are there going to be a few out there who don't? Of course, there were going to be anyway. And there was always the issue too, is we don't necessarily have the resources or the mechanism to go out enforcing new mandates on businesses. But I think at the end of the day, I just feel confident that we're going to be able to depend on our businesses to do things the right way, particularly the ones that have been closed. I think they're going to want to be safe, and first of all, to give their consumers and their customers confidence. But second of all, if we have a huge surge in cases, we could be in a position where we have to shut businesses down again. And a lot of businesses who have been fortunate enough to make it through the first part of this, if there's a second part, they may not be so fortunate. And so that's kind of how we kind of came down on that part.
Yeah, it is difficult to think that they might have to shut down again. And I think that some of that is also why some had not opened. They said it would be a whole lot harder to shut down a second time. So they're kind of making sure that let somebody else be the guinea pig and see if it's going to work and all. And I do think that Tennessee is being very aggressive, and I like that. I like to get these businesses back in, but they're also being safe with you guys and your guidelines. And just as you said, the enforcement side of that is, I have always said, and people laugh at me when I say I don't want to make a rule that I can't enforce.
Yeah.
because then none of your rules matter. If you can't say, you don't do this, and then if there's not a consequence or there's not an enforcement of that, then anything you say, nobody's going to take it for really meaning anything. So I think that when people realize that we have to self-police at some point, we have to do our own, take care of ourselves. And some are going to do more precautions than others. Some individuals will that are patronizing these businesses, just as some of the businesses are. So what are you hearing from the economy side of how this is going to, how fast are we going to be able to recover, I guess, from this?
Yeah. So it depends on a lot of things. I'll start with some bad news. I think like in Tennessee, and this is kind of me reverting back to my previous job in Tennessee. So we are an economy that's very dependent on the automotive sector. We have learned from the previous recession and recessions before that, and it's just sort of a fact that states that are more dependent on the automotive sector tend to be a little more vulnerable during economic downturns. And that, like I said, that's been the case for us in the past. We don't necessarily know enough. I think Volkswagen, for example, has been closed, not because they had to, but just for economic reasons. And they opened back up in Chattanooga today. Nissan, I think, has not opened back up quite yet, but we're hoping that they will soon. But I mean, if you think about it, it just makes sense that right now there's probably not a lot of people looking to make a big purchase like an automobile. If I think if we lose steam and lose momentum or more momentum than we've already lost in the automotive sector, that in Tennessee, that has the chance to kind of reverberate throughout the rest of the rest of our industries. On the upside, it really is just a fact that we have done just an exceptionally good job of containing the virus compared to our peer states. And I do think that there is also there's so many complicated. I'd love to just give you a straight answer, but there's so many complicating factors in this. One of the things I think too that's very interesting. It'll be interesting to watch as a rural guy. I've noticed that there's a little bit of an urban-rural divide as to how people view the COVID-19, the virus. And I think like in probably more rural places where there have been fewer cases, it makes sense that there's going to be a little bit less fear among consumers to get back out. And in Dyersburg, where I'm from, talking to my parents a lot, and they're going out and they're telling me they're seeing everybody and people are hugging each other and not a lot of mask wearing. Whereas you go out in Nashville, restaurants and stuff have been allowed to open, but a lot still haven't opened. And when you go to the restaurant, there's not a lot of people in there. And the people you see in there are all wearing masks. This is just so unlike anything we've ever seen that I think we just have got to really, for me personally, I'm going to have a hard time making predictions. And I think we just got to do everything we can do to just make it as short as possible. And, I mentioned those 450,000 people that filed for unemployment. There's a good news kind of aspect of that too, which a lot of those were kind of labeled as temporary layoffs. So on the other hand, temporary layoffs can turn into permanent layoffs, and we'll just have to see. But there's a chance that if those people, those businesses open back up and those people can get back on the payroll, that it won't be a very long-lived downturn, if that makes sense.
It does. And I feel like that we kind of have a little bit of an advantage. Portland is a little bit more diversified. We do have a lot of automotive, but we also have several other type of businesses here.
Right.
One thing that we also should mention is if you're in an automotive industry, a supplier, some of these states are not letting them open. Some of these states are shut down, and those are going to have to open to help the trickle down effect for some of these businesses to get back up to normal. And I agree. I do see more of your rural areas having a little bit less, but they're also not as congested. There's not as many people around, so they don't see that constant connection of people. I know every time I go out and I meet somebody or I see somebody that I know and some of them stick their hand out to shake my hand. I always wait to see what their reaction is because I mean, I'm good not, but so it's just funny. I went to a restaurant here in town yesterday, and as I was there, a gentleman that I had not seen in years came up to me and he shook my hand. And then before he left, he gave me a big old hug. And I was like, hey, I guess he's not social distancing. So again, you don't know. The reactions are so different from different people. And
Yeah.
It's hard to know. And nobody is to me, I feel like that we just need to be patient and be kind to one another.
Yeah.
Everybody has their views on it. So I think that number one, I forget, and it has taken me a long time not to stick my hand out to shake somebody's hand because that is where we're from. That is what we do. So it is a new mindset, and how do we react to that is going to be different.
Totally. And we've been, we're part of our kind of encouragement in our guidelines is we're encouraging everybody to wear masks, and particularly employees and businesses that open back up. And I'm having the hardest time remembering to put my mask on when I go out. It just takes a little time to adjust. I had to get I walked in the other day and I saw my boss on the elevator, and he had his mask on and I didn't, and he got on to me about it. And so ever since then, I've been doing a better job of wearing it. But it took my boss getting on to me for me to realize, oh wait, this applies to me too. It just takes a little time.
Well, my husband's been working from home since the beginning. He works downtown Nashville, and some are going back in. Well, he went back in yesterday for a couple of meetings that he had to go in. And when he goes in, there's not a lot of people there. It's, 350 or so employees, but there's probably 25 employees in the building because most are still working from home. But when he goes in, there's a mask he has to put on. They're doing the temperature checks, and they're going through all of that. He said he left it. If you leave your office, you're supposed to put your mask on. So he left his office, he put his mask on, and he went to the restroom. He come back, he said, I couldn't breathe. So I think it's just a mindset of getting used to. And I hope that people realize now what our nurses and our doctors have had to go through, not even just now, but all along. They've worn the mask and taken care of things. So
exactly.
Is there any discussion about sporting events and the larger concerts? I know that they opened up for practice, and where do you see that going? Will we have fall football? That's a huge question.
Yeah. Well, in football will be a tough one. And I'm glad we don't have to get to that quite yet. Larger events and concerts, I should point out too that the governor's directives apply to 89 counties that have state-controlled health departments. So there's 6 counties, Davidson being the closest one to us. Davidson is one of 6 counties in the state that has an independently owned or independently controlled health department. And so they have some flexibility to determine timelines on their own. So our guidelines that are coming out this week that will start Friday for large attractions and venues, those will be venues and attractions in the 89 counties. So Davidson County, it's still going to be up to Metro Nashville to decide when places like the Bridgestone, and it'll be up to Shelby County and Memphis to decide when the FedEx Forum opens for concerts or for Grizzlies games or whatever it may be. I think that, you mentioned youth, like talking about the football, the big hot topic right now that many legislators and many mayors are very interested in is youth baseball, and also to a slightly lesser extent, summer camps. And those are a couple of things that we're pretty actively talking about right now. So I think, well, I don't want to kind of give it away which way I think we're going on that, but I just, for people that are wondering whether their kids' baseball leagues are going to be able to play, just hang on for another few days or maybe a week at the most. And I think that we'll be putting out some guidance on those because I know everybody's eager to figure out what they're going to do with their kids all summer. So.
That's true, because a lot of these summer camps are how they have daycare, so and I'm sure that when the summer camps do open, they're going to have to be run a little bit different. And
Right.
when you look at baseball, typically your summer baseball season, unless you're travel baseball, but your summer league play is really not much time left of that anyway. So
Yeah.
I feel like that it maybe if they can get in and just do a couple of tournaments, do a couple of games, maybe just feel like that they actually had a season,
Sure.
might be good. But, all of high school lost all of their spring sports. And I know it
Yeah.
is devastating, but it's something that
Yeah.
you have to do. Our Strawberry Festival, we had to cancel that. And, we couldn't bring 30 to 40,000 people into a small town of Portland and do that safely. So,
Yeah.
again, we have to do things, and we hate the decisions that we're having to make.
Right.
But we all want to be safe as possible. Now, with your high school or even just school in general, I know school starting back in August. Do you think there's any chance that they'll be not going back in August? Or do you think everything will be pretty much ready? Now, changes may be made, but you think we'll still be able to return back to school in August?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it'll be. It'll just be something, I think, where we're obviously with reopening the economy. It'll have to be kind of a point maybe where we step back and let the dust settle and see how the disease reacts to more people being out and more people being in the streams of commerce. The fall school year is probably far enough away at this point that I think I think the governor's going to keep all options on the table first of all. But I don't think they're at a point where they would even be thinking very hard about canceling the fall semester, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, I know that parents have realized that they cannot be teachers.
Right.
They cannot teach it is probably the most stressful thing that some of these parents have had to do. Luckily, mine are all grown, so I didn't have to do any of that. But trying to work from home, do school from home, keep the kids from killing each other at home. I mean, I know that it is just they have a little more appreciation for those teachers, I believe, that sit in that class all day long with those students. But yes. And we have the events just like the Strawberry Festival is canceled. We have our Music on Main. It's June 11th. And that was one of the concert series I'm talking about. And, we're not making a decision until the 1st of June. So
Good.
I realize that you just have to wait. I mean, and I'm a planner. So this waiting until 2 weeks before is difficult, but it's the best decision unless you just want to say you cancel everything, because if you want a chance to have it, you just have to wait.
Yeah. And if it's possible to wait, that's definitely been my recommendation to many mayors. And there's some things that where you can't wait. Like there's this music festival in Franklin today that's a big money generator called the Pilgrimage Festival. They had to cancel. It's in September. And who knows? Come September, everything may be fine. And they would have been fine, but there's no way that to plan for something like that, you have to start spending a lot of money and making a lot of plans. And there's no way that they could just take the risk, which is terribly unfortunate. And I think the hope is that we can just do the best job possible right now to combat this disease, in hopes that we won't be back in this position again.
Well, I do appreciate you coming out and joining us here with some information, a little insight to what's going on. I know people think that why can't they just make a decision? Why can't they just? But it's not just cut and dry. There's a lot of thought and a lot of planning that goes into that. And we do appreciate all the effort that you and the team is putting into this. And I like it that you're involving everybody that's a part of it and that's in the day to day, just as Dollywood and your local people that are in your businesses, that they know what their processes are and how they can improve them. So so that makes sense.
Yeah, that was important to the governor from day one. Nobody knows more about how they can operate safely and effectively in this new landscape than the business owners a lot of times. And we wanted to be sure we've kept them in the conversation nonstop. I definitely hope we've done that.
Well, and I know, like I say, it is frustrating. I think some of the largest complaints from businesses were the not knowing until, just as we said, we just have to wait and make those decisions so close to the deadlines of things coming up. And it's just frustrating when people are trying to plan. And now, of course, we have other issues with restaurants and, the shortage of the processed foods that they can get to continue the restaurant. And so again, it's just a domino effect that we're seeing from all of these things.
That's right. Yeah, exactly right.
But the Tennessee Pledge, let's talk a little just for a second on that. And that is pretty much the different guidelines for each classification, whether it's restaurants or beauty salons and things like that. This is pledging to go by the guidelines that have been given out. Is that correct?
Yeah. And if you go to tnpledge.com, you can see them all. We've got guidelines there for things like restaurants and retail, gyms, guidelines for bowling alleys. We've gotten pretty specific on a lot of those things that were required to be closed, and then also things that were never required by the state to be closed, like manufacturing. We have guidelines for as well, because even though manufacturers have been open, or if they closed, it was for economic reasons and not because the state asked them to. But everybody, the hope is that everybody steps up and adopts new guidelines or new safeguarding procedures. The idea, I think, behind the pledge is, what we're sort of communicating to people is don't follow the pledge for us. Don't do it for the state. Don't do it for the governor. Do this for, your friends and your neighbors and the people you go to church with who have been laid off from their jobs or who have lost their business that they've owned for 20 years and sank their entire livelihoods in. And now, that they're never going to be able to reopen that business. Do this for them. That's a message that I found resonates a lot more with people and makes people want to do things the right way than asking them to do something else for their government. And so that's been the general message.
Well, and I think that's what people need to realize is the people that are working in these businesses, their family. They have a lot of them have been there a long time. So to protect your family, you want to put in some of these safeguards for the customers as well as your employees. So right. Again, we do appreciate all your hard work. I think Kristen has put a link here to the Tennessee.gov pledge, so it's on there, so they can check that out. And we look forward to hearing more information and hearing how that changes our results and where we're going with that. I do know we're doing a lot more testing, so we're getting more positives than I think people understand. I think people don't understand that the more testing you're doing, the more positives you're going to get. So,
and it's a good thing to do more tests is a good thing, even though it yields obviously more positives. And another thing to point out too is, the governor has been among the first in the nation to say that he was going to do universal testing at every senior center and at every prison. And we've had a couple of terrible outbreaks at prisons. There was, I think, 1,100 or 1,200 positive tests at the Trousdale facility, the prison. And that makes our numbers go up, which, has a way of making us look bad. But the governor's not worried about the optics or, how it looks. I think the governor really is just genuinely trying to do the best to figure out where the disease is and how can we contain it. And I think you have to respect that for sure.
I also think it would be good to note, too, that of those that were tested and the positives that came out of the prison and several of these places, the majority of them did not have any symptoms. Like
98% in that Trousdale facility were asymptomatic but had it, which is pretty unbelievable. Yeah.
So I think that sometimes when you realize that even if that we have several positives, it's not always that they're positives other than hoping to stay at home to keep the spread of it. But people are not it's not the highest sick level on a lot of these.
Yeah, that's a very good distinction.
So, but I do, like I say, we do appreciate you. And if there is anything that we can do, you let me know. We look forward to working you with the economic development side of it, because as soon as all of these plans are in place, I'm sure you'll scoot back over to your real job, if you want to call it that.
That's right.
And we, I do look forward to working with you on that realm as well. So,
Yeah. Thanks so much, Sherry. I enjoyed it.
thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.